So this little piece is dedicated to Ben and Victoria, um, who have the spirit of the hippies circa 2025. So we're talking about the San Francisco sound, the sound of the 60s. So the San Francisco sound, originally, what was going on prior to the Beatles and things like that was the coffee houses and people sporting goatees and reading poetry and singing folk music. And then that segued to people plugging in and going electric. And then a sound came out of San Francisco in the Bay Area, and it wasn't based on blues. It was really coming out of the folk traditions and some country influences. So you had the San Francisco groups, the most famous, of course, being like the Jefferson Airplane. They put out an album in 1967, Surrealistic Pillow. It had Somebody Love and White Rabbit. They were at the Monterey Pop Festival. And at the same time, Grateful Dead had an album, their first debut album coming out. It wasn't a hit maker. I liked their rendition of Morning Dew, a very famous song on this album. And they were playing all around, and they were at Monterey Pop. Then you had Big Brother and the Holding Company with Janis Joplin. They started in 1965, but really their thing was the album Cheap Thrills, their second album. And they had, Piece of My Heart. And but I like their rendition of Summertime Blues, Janis Joplin. I like that. That was the big song for me on this album. You had Big Brother and the Holding Company. I mean, that was Janis Joplin. Then you had Quicksilver Messenger Service. They had one song, Fresh Hair. They came in 1965. They were really well known, and but they weren't a group that had big hits or anything. But I'd have to say the San Francisco groups weren't really looking for big hits, but most of them had big hits. You had the Moby Grape. They had this song Omaha, which had some interesting sound effects on it. But my favorite was Sitting by the Window. All these groups were at Monterey Pop Festival, which is in 1967. And so then you had It's a Beautiful Day, which had their beautiful song, White Bird. Just wonderful instrumentation and great singing on this, their album titled It's a Beautiful Day. But at the same time, what was going on was you had these philosophers being famous, people were reading Jack Kerouac's On the Road. They were dabbling in Zen Buddhism. This was a cultural shift. It wasn't just the music, people were quoting Alan Watts' Zen Buddhism books. There was a lot of mysticism and a different philosophy. And then at the same time, from across the pond, there was some things going on too. There was an artist called Donovan, and he had a couple big songs there. My favorite's The Hurdy-Gurdy Man, which is a great song, and it's I guess it's a precursor to heavier things because heavy fuzz guitar on it. And another song there, Season of the Witch, which was a real popular song. and which they say was written for Jimi Hendrix originally. You had Traffic, which I mentioned. Traffic was be considered a supergroup now because of the people in it. Dave Mason, Steve Winwood, and my favorite song was Dear Mr. Fantasy, which so many guitarists cover. You had but the soundtrack of the 60s would not be complete without Buffalo Springfield's For What It's Worth. That was an LA group, and that's another group that could have been considered a super group now because they had Neil Young and Stephen Stills and Richard Furry, and they had a big song For What It's Worth. I saw them in person, and people were screaming, and they were upset because we hear their music. And then, of course, I almost forgot Barry McGuire's Eve of Destruction. That was in '65. And things evolved from the good feeling, the good vibes, because now you started to have the news of the Vietnam War providing, blowing in like a wind, like a current. So that's just a little sketch, It wasn't just the music, it was the vibe. It was a feeling of hope, of something different. Going from the beatnik area, bohemian era to, to a different kind of spirit. And it wasn't like what you had on the East Coast. It wasn't coming from the blues. It really came out of the folk genre. So this is just a little glimpse. I'm going to visit this topic in the future, I hope on a podcast. So I say peace and love, and I'm glad that some people are thinking about revisiting the vibe and appreciating the music. So over and out. Peace and love.